The knife slipped again at 3 a.m., and Harlow's hands trembled with exhaustion. She thought she was alone in the empty diner, just another night of endless work. Then the door opened, and a stranger in an expensive coat walked in. He watched her chop vegetables with a dull blade and asked a simple question. She had no idea that answering him would change her life forever. The knife slipped again, and Harlow Vance winced as the dull blade crushed the tomato instead of cutting it. She glanced at the clock on the wall, 3:17 a.m. The diner was empty except for her and the hum of the old refrigerator in the back. Her hands ached from hours of prep work, but she couldn't stop now. Chef Martinez needed everything ready by 5, and if she failed, she'd lose the only job that paid her in cash at the end of each shift. No waiting 2 weeks for a paycheck she couldn't afford to wait for. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and kept chopping. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, casting harsh shadows across the cutting board. Outside, the street was dark and silent. Harlow had been working since 6 p.m. the previous evening. First her shift at the gas station, then cleaning tables here at the diner, and now this, prepping vegetables because the morning cook had quit without notice. She'd sleep for maybe 2 hours before her next shift started. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She didn't need to check it to know it was another email from State University. Final notice. Payment overdue. Enrollment canceled. She blinked hard and focused on the carrots in front of her. Crying wouldn't change anything. It never did. The bell above the door chimed, and Harlow's head snapped up. No one came in at this hour. The diner wasn't even officially open. A man stepped inside, tall and wearing an expensive-looking coat that seemed out of place in this neighborhood. His shoes were polished, his hair neat. He looked like he'd walked out of a boardroom and gotten lost. "We're closed," Harlow called out, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Opens at 6. The man didn't leave. He walked toward the counter slowly, his eyes scanning the empty diner. "I saw the light on," he said. His voice was calm, measured. "I just need coffee. I'll pay extra." Harlow hesitated. She wasn't supposed to serve anyone, but she also couldn't afford to turn away money. "Fine. Sit anywhere." She set down the knife and wiped her hands on her apron. Her fingers were stained with vegetable juice and small cuts from the dull blade. She moved behind the counter and started a fresh pot of coffee. The man sat at the counter instead of a booth. He folded his hands and watched her work. It made her uncomfortable, the way his gaze followed her movements. "You're here alone?" he asked. "Cook's in the back." Harlow lied. She didn't know this man, and she wasn't about to tell him she was here by herself. He nodded slowly. "What's your name?" "Harlow." "Harlow," he repeated like he was testing how it sounded. "That's a unique name." She didn't respond. She poured the coffee as soon as it was ready and slid the cup across the counter. $3. He pulled out his wallet and placed a 20 on the counter. "Keep it." Harlow stared at the bill. $17 for a cup of coffee. She wanted to refuse it, but her pride was worth less than the gas money she needed. "Thanks," she muttered, taking the bill and shoving it into her apron. The man sipped his coffee and didn't say anything for a while. Harlow returned to the cutting board, hoping he'd drink and leave. "You're good with that knife," he said suddenly, "even with a blade that dull." Harlow paused. "It's all we have." "Why are you here at 3 in the morning?" She kept her eyes on the vegetables. "Because I need the money." "For what?" "College," she said before she could stop herself. Then she shook her head. It was for college." "Not anymore." The man set down his cup. "What happened?" Harlow didn't know why she was talking to him. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the fact that he was the first person in months who'd asked her a question that wasn't in order. "I couldn't pay," she said quietly. "Tuition was due, and I didn't have it. So they dropped me." "What were you studying?" "Business management." He leaned forward slightly. "Why business management?" Harlow stopped chopping and looked at him. His expression was serious, like he actually cared about the answer. "Because I want to run something someday," she said. "A real business. Something that's mine. Something that actually helps people." The man nodded. "That's a good reason." "Doesn't matter now," Harlow said, turning back to her work. I couldn't afford it. So here I am, chopping vegetables at 3 in the morning. What about loans? Scholarships? Harlow's jaw tightened. I applied for everything. Didn't qualify. My parents made just enough that I didn't count as low income, but not enough to actually help me pay. And then my dad got sick, and whatever savings we had went to medical bills. The man was quiet for a long moment. Harlow could feel him watching her, but she didn't look up. Is your father okay? He asked softly. He died last year. The words came out flat, emotionless. Harlow had said them so many times now that they didn't hurt the way they used to. They just existed, like a fact she'd memorized. I'm sorry, the man said, and he sounded like he meant it. Harlow shrugged. Me too. She finished the carrots and moved on to the onions. Her eyes were already burning from exhaustion, and now the onions made it worse. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision. The man finished his coffee and stood. Harlow thought he was leaving, but instead he walked around the counter. What are you doing? She asked, stepping back. Helping, he said simply. He took off his coat and draped it over a chair, then rolled up his sleeves. You have another knife? Harlow stared at him. You don't have to. I know, he said. But you're exhausted, and this will go faster with 2 people. She didn't know what to say. No one had offered to help her in a long time. She opened a drawer and handed him a second knife, just as dull as hers. They worked in silence for a while. The man was slow at first, but he found a rhythm. Harlow glanced at him a few times, trying to figure out who he was. He didn't look like someone who spent time in kitchens. What's your name? She asked finally. He smiled slightly. Everett. Everett what? Just Everett, he said. For now. Harlow frowned but didn't push. Maybe he was running from something too. They worked side by side until the prep was done. By the time they finished, the sky outside was starting to lighten. Harlow's whole body ached, but the work was complete. Everett washed his hands and dried them on a towel. You do this every night? Most nights, Harlow said. Depends on what shifts I can get. And you're doing this instead of college. I told you I can't afford. What if you could? Harlow looked at him sharply. What? Everett leaned against the counter. What if someone paid for it? What would you do? That's not how the world works, Harlow said, her voice harder now. People don't just pay for strangers to go to college. Some people do. Harlow shook her head. I don't need charity. It's not charity, Everett said. It's investment. In what? In someone who deserves a chance. Harlow's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but she'd learned a long time ago that hope was dangerous. Why would you do that? Everett smiled, and for the first time, there was something unreadable in his expression. Because I know what it's like to fight for something and lose, and I know what it's like to get a second chance. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. He set it on the counter between them. Call me when you're ready. Harlow looked down at the card. It was plain, white, with a name and a phone number. Nothing else. Everett Calloway. She looked up, but he was already walking toward the door. Wait, she called after him. Who are you? He paused at the door and looked back. Someone who thinks you're worth betting on. And then he was gone. The bell chimed softly as the door closed behind him. Harlow stood alone in the empty diner, holding the business card in her trembling hands. The sun was rising now, casting pale light through the windows. She stared at the name on the card and wondered if she'd just met a stranger. Or if her life had just changed forever. Harlow didn't call the number. 3 days passed, and the business card stayed tucked in her apron pocket, crumpled and stained with grease. Every time she reached for it, doubt crept in. Men like Everett didn't just help people like her. There had to be a catch. But she couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he'd rolled up his sleeves and helped her without asking for anything. The way he'd looked at her when she talked about college, like he actually believed she could do it. On the 4th night, Harlow's shift at the gas station ended early. The owner cut her hours without explanation, just shrugged and said business was slow. That meant $60 less this week. $60 she desperately needed. She sat in her car in the empty parking lot, staring at the dashboard. The check engine light had been on for 2 months. The rent was due in 5 days. And she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. She pulled the business card from her pocket and stared at it. Everett J. Calloway. She typed the name into her phone. The search results loaded slowly, and then her breath caught. Everett J. Calloway. So, Calloway Enterprises. She clicked on the first article. Billionaire. Self-made. Started from nothing and built one of the largest hospitality companies in the country. Hotels, restaurants, real estate. Harlow's hands shook. A billionaire had helped her chop vegetables at 3 in the morning. She scrolled through photos. There he was, in a suit, shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. But his face was the same. Calm, serious, unreadable. She read an interview from 2 years ago. I believe in people who work hard and want to build something real. That's where I came from, and that's who I invest in. Harlow stared at the words until they blurred. Then she dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before he answered. This is Everett. It's Harlow, she said, her voice barely steady. From the diner. There was a pause, and then his voice softened. I was hoping you'd call. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Would it have changed anything? Harlow thought about that. I don't know. Maybe. That's why I didn't tell you, Everett said. I wanted to meet the person, not the performance. People act different when they know who I am. I don't understand why you're doing this, Harlow said. You don't know me. I know enough, Everett replied. I know you're working 3 jobs to survive. I know you gave up college to take care of your father. I know you're still fighting when most people would have quit. Harlow's eyes stung. That doesn't mean I deserve help. Yes, Everett said firmly. It does. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What do you want from me? Nothing you're not willing to give, he said. I want you to go back to school. Finish your degree. And when you're ready, I want you to come work for me. Work for you? My company, Everett said. I need people who understand what it means to build something from nothing. People who care about more than just profit. Harlow's heart pounded. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to, Everett said. This isn't a loan. It's an investment. If you succeed, I succeed. That's how I see it. Harlow closed her eyes. She wanted to say yes so badly it hurt, but the fear was still there, whispering that this was too good to be true. What if I fail? She asked quietly. Then you fail, Everett said. But you won't. I've built my career on reading people, Harlow, and I'm never wrong. She let out a shaky breath. Okay. Okay. Yes, Harlow said, her voice stronger now. I'll do it. Good, Everett said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'll have my assistant contact you tomorrow. We'll get everything set up. Tuition, housing, whatever you need. Thank you, Harlow whispered. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, Everett said. Just promise me you'll work as hard in school as you did in that diner. I promise. Then that's all I need. They talked for a few more minutes, and then Everett had to go. Harlow sat in her car for a long time after the call ended, staring at the phone in her hand. For the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. The next 6 months were a blur. Harlow re-enrolled at State University, and true to his word, Everett covered everything. Tuition, books, a small apartment near campus. He even arranged for her to keep one part-time job so she wouldn't feel completely dependent. She threw herself into her classes. Business management, finance, marketing. Everything she dreamed about studying but thought she'd never get the chance to learn. Everett checked in every few weeks. Never intrusive, just a quick call or email to see how she was doing. Sometimes he'd send her articles or books he thought she'd find useful. He treated her like a mentee, not a charity case. By the end of her first semester, Harlow had a 4.0 GPA. By the end of her second, she'd been invited to join an exclusive business honor society. And through it all, she kept the memory of that night at the diner. The exhaustion, the fear, the moment when a stranger walked in and changed everything. When graduation day finally came, Harlow stood on the stage in her cap and gown, holding her diploma. The crowd applauded, but she was only looking for one person. Everett was in the back row, standing and clapping with a proud smile on his face. When their eyes met, he nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of everything she'd accomplished. After the ceremony, he met her outside. "Congratulations," he said, shaking her hand. "You earned this." "I couldn't have done it without you," Harlow said. "Yes, you could have," Everett said. "It just would have taken longer. All I did was open the door. You walked through it." Harlow smiled, tears streaming down her face. "What now?" Everett handed her an envelope. "Now you come work for me." She opened it. Inside was a job offer. Assistant manager, Callaway Enterprises, Restaurant Division. Harlow looked up at him, stunned. This is a real position." "I told you," Everett said. "I don't do charity. I invest in people. And you're one of the best investments I've ever made." 3 years later, Harlow stood in front of her own restaurant. A small place in the same neighborhood where the diner used to be. The diner was long gone now, torn down and replaced. But Harlow had rebuilt something better. The sign above the door read Second Chances Cafe. Inside, the walls were painted warm colors, and the kitchen was filled with brand new equipment. Harlow had hired people like her. Single parents, former addicts, anyone who needed a job and a chance to prove themselves. Everett stood beside her on opening day, hands in his pockets, watching the crowd gather outside. "You did it," he said. "We did it," Harlow corrected. Everett smiled. "No. This was all you." Harlow looked at him, this man who'd walked into her life at her lowest moment and refused to let her give up. "Why me?" she asked. "That night at the diner, why did you stop?" Everett was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I saw someone who reminded me of myself. 20 years ago, I was washing dishes in a kitchen just like that one. I was angry, exhausted, and ready to quit. And then someone gave me a chance. I've spent my whole life trying to pay that forward." Harlow's throat tightened. "I won't waste it." "I know you won't," Everett said. He turned to face her fully. "You've already proven that. Now go run your restaurant. Make it everything you dreamed it could be." Harlow nodded. She took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The smell of fresh coffee and baking bread filled the air. Customers poured in, filling the tables, laughing and talking. And in the back, in the kitchen, Harlow picked up a knife. A sharp one this time. She smiled to herself as she started prepping vegetables. This time, she wasn't doing it because she had to. She was doing it because she wanted to. Because this was hers. And it all started at 3 a.m. in an empty diner, with a stranger who saw something in her that she'd forgotten was there. The will to keep going, even when everything felt impossible. Harlow looked out at the dining room, at the people she'd hired, at the life she'd built. And she knew, without a doubt, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. And that's how one moment at 3 a.m. changed everything. Harlow went from struggling to survive to building her own dream, all because someone believed in her when she'd stopped believing in herself. Sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes all we need is one person to see our potential when we can't see it ourselves. What would you do if a stranger offered to change your life? Would you trust them or walk away? If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps us keep bringing you these incredible stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for a second chance. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next emotional journey. We post new inspiring stories every week. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, your breakthrough might be just one moment away.